So in this video, I'm going to show you a mashup of different types of hard reading questions, and I'm going to show you exactly how I approach each one to score a 1590 on the digital SAT. Before we get started, quick shout out to my tutor Puneet for giving me this beautiful piece from India. Thanks, Puneet. I told her I'd wear it in a video and she didn't believe me. And before we get started too, guys, make sure you smash that subscribe button and notification bell below. We are getting close to a milestone of subscribers. So if you appreciate this channel and the content I'm pushing out to help you succeed on the SAT, please just do me a solid, hit that subscribe button below. It'll mean the world to me and it'll also help you out too. Now, quick note before we get started, all of these reading passages are from Test 8 in Bluebook. So if you haven't done Test 8 yet, this is a spoiler alert. You might want to take the test first before you watch this video. We have what describes the function of the underlined sentence of the text of the whole. Now, the underlined sentence says, John Redding loved to wander down to the water's edge and casting in dry twigs, watch them sail away down a stream to Jacksonville, the sea, the wide world, and he wanted to follow them. So it basically sounds like he wants to get out of Jacksonville. He's like watching the twigs and seeing how it's going on a journey into the wide world. We want something that matches that. People are not in the town are not confused by his behavior. That is not the purpose of the sentence. It's not an extended description of a location. It's not like they're saying he was in a murky pond and the sun was shining. That would be an extended description of where he's at. Illustrates the uniqueness of John's imagination. Okay, no, it's not talking about, oh, John, he really is a thinker, thinks outside the box and imagines. No. D says it suggests that John longs to experience a larger life outside of the Florida woods. Yep, a larger life outside the Florida woods. I can't talk. A larger life outside of the Florida woods is the wide world. So there's your synonym. Okay, 6 says, based on the text, how would Faccarelli and Panetta most likely respond to fans' findings? Okay, well, most of the time when you have a double, right, they call these comparative text analyses or something, you're going to have one of these per test. It's either going to come on Module 1 or Module 2. Most of the time, they're going to disagree. I basically say they slug. So that's something you want to keep in mind on these. Now, what I like to do is I like to just go to the last sentence to see what they're arguing. So this text one says, she modeled a hypothetical merger of Minneapolis area newspapers and found that subscription prices would rise following a merger. Now, text 2, I actually like to read the first sentence because usually right away they address what text 1 is saying. It says, economists Dario Faccarelli and Fabio Panetta have argued that research on the effect of mergers on prices has focused excessively on short-term effects. So this is their argument. They said it's too excessive focusing on short-term effects, meaning she was probably too short-term with her research. Let's go to the answers and find something that models that. So they would encourage fans to investigate whether a projected effect on subscription prices persists over an extended period. Yeah, she's too short term. They would encourage her to test it more long term. The answer is C. I'll go through why the other answers are wrong though, just in case you picked a different answer, okay? They would recommend that fan compare the near-term effect of a merger on subscription prices in the Minneapolis area with the effect of a merger in another newspaper market. No, we're not comparing different markets. That's irrelevant. B says they would argue that over the long term, the expenses incurred by the merged newspaper company will also increase. No, because that was not their argument, so that's irrelevant. It could be true, but it wasn't said in the text. D says they would claim that mergers have a different effect on consumer prices in the newspaper industry than in most other industries. Again, we're comparing two things that are not relevant to the text. We're not comparing the newspaper industry to other industries, so that's also out. So be very careful. Assess each answer choice because what the SAT likes to do is they will compare different things and it's not a comparison that's relevant to the text. So watch for that. All right, guys, let me just break down number 7 for you. They said, how does Lord Chancellor respond to the crowd? Well, you'll notice in the text what happens is the crowd is shouting different stuff. Some are shouting bread. Some are shouting taxes. And then Lord Chancellor says, What can it all mean? I never heard such shouting before, and at this time in the morning with such unanimity. That basically means it comes from the word unanimous, which if you know a unanimous vote means you all agree. So it's basically like uniform, like together, they're all in sync, which is absolutely not true because they were all shouting different stuff. D is the right answer. He describes the crowd as being united, even though the crowd clearly appears otherwise. Number 8, we have which choice best describes data in the graph that supports Charles and Stephen's claim. Charles and Stephen's claim that the likelihood of voting is driven in part by potential voters' confidence in their assessments of the candidates. Essentially, the more informed voters are about politics, the more confident they are at evaluating whether candidates share views and are thus more likely to vote. So basically, the more informed, the more confident, the more likely to vote. So when we look at this graph, high information, meaning more informed, as you can see, that is higher than the low information every single time. So I want an answer choice that basically says that. So it says, A says at each point on the political orientation scale, high information voters were more likely than low information voters to vote. Yes, because they're higher, their probability of voting percentage is higher. So that would be the right answer. Okay, number 9, we have which choice best describes data from the table that support Barrett and Rayfield's suggestion. Okay, let's see what their suggestion is. So it says down here, Paul Barrett and Emily Rayfield have suggested that an estimate of dinosaur bite force may be significantly influenced by the methodology used in generating that estimate. Significantly influenced by the methodology, okay? Which is true because look at the body mass scaling method has this much bite force versus the tooth bone interaction analysis has a tiny little bite force in comparison. So you can tell that the method really does matter. Let's go to the answers and see what one would be best. We have the study by Mears used body mass scaling and produced the lowest estimated maximum bite force, while the study by Cost used muscular and skeletal modeling and produced the highest estimated maximum. Okay, well, I already know that the study by Cost did not produce the highest estimated maximum because the highest estimated maximum I just pointed out was from Mears. Cost is this one here. That's not the highest. So sometimes answers will sound good, but they're just going to be wrong with the graph. So that's wrong. B says in their study, Gignac and Erickson used tooth bone interaction analysis to produce an estimated bite force range with a minimum of 8,000. Okay, here's the problem with B. They're not comparing different methods. That's part of the claim. So if we're only focused on one method, that's not telling us anything and it's not supporting the claim. C says the bite force estimates produced by Bates and Fockingham and by Cost et al. Were similar to each other, while the estimates produced by Mears and Gignac and Erickson each differed substantially from each other estimate. Okay, let's see if, just curious, Bates and Fockingham and Cost had the same method. So Bates and Fockingham is here. They use muscular and skeletal modeling. So does Cost. Okay, cool. The answer is definitely going to be C. All right, let's go to 10. Okay, 10 is a little tricky. Be careful with this. It says, which finding, if true, would most directly undermine Foster's hypothesis? So if we're undermining it, we're going against it. So what I would recommend is when you read the hypothesis, reverse it or make up one that would undermine it so you're clear on what you're looking for. So if we go down here, it says Foster hypothesized that damage to eelgrass roots increases the plant's rate of sexual reproduction. This in turn boosts genetic diversity, which benefits the meadow's health overall. Okay, so one thing you'll notice too is they talk about sea otters are the ones that damage the roots. So if we go to map this out, basically if there's more sea otters, then that's going to cause more damage to the roots, which is going to cause more sexual reproduction, which is going to cause a boost in genetic diversity, which would basically be genetic diversity. Oh my gosh, there's a lot here, which is going to boost health. So health is going to go up. So if I want something to undermine it, one of those things needs to be broken. Either when sea otters are there, there's no damage to the roots, or when there's lots of damage to the roots, it actually hurts their health or reduces the sexual reproduction. So all of these are basically positive correlations right now, and I want to find an answer choice that highlights a negative correlation, where if one goes up, the other goes down. We have, at some sites in the study, eelgrass meadows are found near otter populations that are small and have only recently been introduced. Okay, the location by sea otters is really irrelevant to this. Let's get rid of A. B says at several sites not included in the study, there are large, well-established sea otter populations, but no eelgrass meadows. Well, that doesn't really mean anything, because if they're damaging it, maybe they ate all of them. Again, not really what we're looking for. C says at several sites not included in the study, eelgrass meadows' health correlates negatively with the length of residence and size of the otter populations. That's what I'm looking for. If it's a negative correlation, that means if the sea otters go up, the health is going to go down, which is basically the opposite of what we mapped out over here with the hypothesis. So I'm going to go with C. I'm so confident in that, I'm just going to move on. Okay, 11 says, which finding of true would most directly support Paredes' argument? Okay, so what is his argument? Americo Paredes, by contrast, argued that while some Spanish influence is undeniable, Mexican-American folklore is mainly the product of the ongoing interactions of various cultures in Mexico and the United States. Well, if you read back up here, and if you just know a thing or two about history, Spain, obviously the conquistadors, they came over a long, long time ago, right? But the fact that they're saying that Mexican-American folklore is influenced by ongoing interactions between Mexico and the United States, that's going against a previous claim that basically said that Spain was largely contributing to the Mexican folklore. So we need to find an answer that matches that. We have A, the folklore that the ethnographers collected includes several songs written in the form of a decima. Okay, this shows Spanish influence. No, I want to find an answer that talks about ongoing relations with Mexico and the United States. D is actually the right answer to this one, because it says most of the folklore consisted of corridos of a clearly recent origin, is basically the synonym for ongoing interactions. The other ones don't work. All right, guys, now we're on to number 12, which I think is arguably the hardest question on this entire test. So let me break it down for you as simply as possible. They want to know what is best supported by data in the graph. Here's what's going on according to the passage, because there's a lot of technical terms and nuances and such. What they say is they say that there's mutations that silence DPTA, DPTB, or both DPTA and DPTB. Now, who does that? Well, type A silences DPTA. Type B silences DPTB. So I don't like thinking of it in this term. If it silences it, it means it's not present. So really what it means is DPTB is present with A, and it means that DPTA is present with B. Now, what happens with AB is they silence both DPTA and B, okay? So really, there's no defense. It has nothing present in AB. When I look at the graph, what happens? Well, it looks like AB goes down in this case. And by the way, they said in the text, this is the case of an A. Saccharine infection, which is a bacteria. So we're seeing how the A. Saccharine bacteria affects these guys. AB goes down. What else goes down? B goes down. Well, what do they have in common? AB and B one only has DPTA present. They both are missing DPTB. So both of those are missing DPTB. Now this one up here, type A, look at how steady it is. It barely is affected by the A. Sakari at all. This has DPTB. So what that suggests is that the A. Sakari infection, there's protection if you have the DPTB. What answer says that? C. DPTB may have developed as a specific defense against A. Sakari. All right, guys, you've seen a bunch of the reading passages so far. Comment below which one do you think was the hardest and why. All right, now we are on to a logically completes the text. So we have some economists have attributed the increasing adoption of automation technology by firms in the United States in part to the productivity gains firms can achieve by automating tasks previously requiring paid labor. Okay, basically what they're saying is they're saying that companies are adopting AI because the productivity gains. So AI causes productivity to go up, which makes sense because more can get done with less human beings. And then it says Darren A. recently complicated this account. Okay, if he complicated it, because this is a positive, chances are he's probably going to introduce a negative or something that gets us to think about AI in a different way by showing not only that automation's productivity gains are often unremarkable. So what he's really saying is, hey, productivity is kind of mid, but there is a disparity in the U.S. tax code between automation technology and the labor it is nominally equivalent to. Okay, if you don't understand what that means, that's why they put the colon here, because they're going to explain more. The tax code classifies automation-related technology as a depreciating asset, meaning that capital expenditures on that technology can reduce a firm's tax burden relative to its tax burden if equivalent expenditures were labor costs. Okay, let me break this down for you guys. So what they're saying is AI is a depreciating asset, which means that the money they spend on it can reduce a firm's tax burden relative to its tax burden if equivalent expenditures were labor costs. It sounds like the relative here. I think that's the sticking point. So it's like, okay, we're relating it to the labor costs, right? So automation technology and the labor it is nominally equivalent to. So the tax code classifies automation-related technology as a depreciating asset, okay? Meaning that capital expenditures on that technology can reduce a firm's tax burden relative to its tax burden if equivalent expenditures were labor costs. Together, these findings suggest that, okay, let me just break down what that means to me, but I would want to see the answer choices. If it's relative, it means that they're going to give similar results. So basically, if we spend a bunch of money on AI, then that could count towards our costs, which if you have more costs as a business, it causes you to have to pay less taxes. So basically it's saying, hey, you know, the tax burden will be about the same if your AI costs are about the same as your labor costs. And labor costs basically, guys, is like what you pay people to do the work for you. So it doesn't really sound like it's a bad thing or a good thing. It sounds like AI can reduce the tax burden, which could be good, but the productivity is unremarkable. That's really what this guy is saying. I think what makes this passage so difficult is this is more for college level business majors. And so if you haven't majored in business or run a business, it's much harder to understand what this is saying. This is a good one to skip and come back to later. The explanation that some economists have offered for U.S. firms increasing adoption of automation technology may be based on an overestimation of the tax benefits and productivity gains. Nobody's talking about an overestimation. So even if you don't think you understand what the text is saying, keep it simple, go to the answer choices, because you can really probably weed out 3 wrong ones anyways. Keep it simple. They didn't talk about overestimating. B says U.S. firms' increasing adoption of automation technology may be driven more by the fact that the government indirectly incentivizes firms to adopt that technology than by the ongoing benefits of that technology has for firms' outputs. Outputs is a synonym for productivity. And the government indirectly incentivizes firms has to do with the tax code and alleviating tax burden. That's a synonym for that. So B is actually a match because they did say that the tax burden could be alleviated by using AI. But then the guy basically said that, hey, productivity is unremarkable. So the tax benefits are better than the ongoing benefits for the outputs. I'm definitely leaning B. Let's go C. Changes to the U.S. tax code that result in capital expenditures on automation technology being treated the same as expenditures on labor costs would likely have little effect on firms' productivity, but may encourage further adoption of that technology. May encourage further adoption of that technology. They didn't talk about that. Also, too, the expenditures on the technology and labor costs, they didn't talk about how it affected the productivity. So that's like not said in the text. They just talked about how it affect the tax burden. U.S. firms have actually tended to experience a decrease in productivity as a result of adopting automation technology. They didn't talk about a decrease in productivity. So really, you should have it down to B and C. But B is the right answer. Guys, if you're liking this video so far, show me some love, hit the like button below. All right, another logically completes the text. So we have the morphological novelty of echinoderms, marine invertebrates with radial symmetry, usually star-like around a central point, impedes comparisons with most other animals in which bilateral symmetry on an anterior-posterior head-to-tail axis through a trunk is typical. This might be a good time to make a T-chart. So you could like have basically echinoderms on one side, and then you could have other animals on the other. And then you basically could like list the differences. So this one has radial. This one has head to tail like axis. And so let's do that. We got head to tail axis. So radial means like it's around a center point. And what's interesting is you guys really, to answer this, you need to understand anterior means head, and you need to understand that posterior means tail. So they basically said sea stars have a headless layout. So sea stars basically are no anterior if they have a headless layout. Applying genomic knowledge of SK acorn worms, which are close relatives of sea stars, to the body pattern genes of the sea stars, LF observed activity only in anterior genes across P. monada's entire body, and some posterior genes limited to the edges, suggesting that, okay, so they were thought to have evolved from a headless layout. So that's the old belief. But really, in reality, these sea stars, all they have is a headless layout. All they are is anterior genes. So people thought they had no interior, but they're basically all anterior. Okay, they're all head, they're no tail. Let's go through the answers and see what is the best match here. A says, despite the greater prevalence of anterior genes in sea stars' genetic makeup, posterior genes active at the body's perimeter are primarily responsible for the star-like layout that distinguishes sea stars' radial symmetry. They did not talk about what the posterior genes at the body's perimeter are responsible for. They did not discuss that. It's not in the text. So we have to get rid of A. You would be making an inference if you picked A. If it's not said in the text, don't pick it. B says, contrary to the belief that they evolved from early ancestors with the bilateral form typical of many other animals, sea stars instead originated with an atypical body layout that was neither bilaterally nor radially symmetrical. B sounds like a pretty good match because it is contrary to a belief. They thought something else and then realized something out. It is atypical, like it's all anterior. It's weird. They're weird. So I would keep B. C says, although the two species are closely related, there is only minimal correspondence in the genetic markers for head, tail, and trunk region. Oh, C is wrong because they don't talk about trunk at all. They only talk about head and tail, so I'm not picking C. D says, rather than undergoing changes resulting in the eventual elimination of a head region in their radial body plan, as previously assumed, D star's morphology evolved to completely lack a trunk and consists primarily of a head region. Ooh, this sounds like this could be right too. So now we have to go between B and D. So let's start with D again. Rather than undergoing changes resulting in the eventual elimination of a head region in their radial body plan as previously assumed. Okay, did they assume that they would go through changes resulting in the elimination of a head? Let's go back. It says, thought to have evolved a headless layout from a known bilateral origin. Sure, they did think that they would evolve to have the elimination of a head. D star's morphology evolved to completely lack a trunk and consists primarily of a head region. D sounds great. I would go with D. Let's go check why B is wrong again. Contrary to the belief that they evolved from early ancestors with the bilateral form typical of many other animals. No, that part is wrong. This is a half right, all wrong. That was not the belief. The belief was that they wouldn't have a head region anymore. So let's get rid of B. I can't believe I missed that the first time. All right, guys, that's it for this video today. Thanks so much for watching. Just a heads up, we have an awesome SAT English self-paced course that goes over all of the reading strategies in more detail. You get more practice questions, you get exclusive video lessons taught by yours truly that aren't available on YouTube. We've helped over 1,000 students improve their score, and we'd love to help you too. Heads up, since you're a YouTube viewer, you get $50 off at checkout. Just use promo code 50OFF and you will get that discount. I will link up here to the course. Go grab that. All right, and until next time, guys, happy prepping.